Well, it's weird that you asked that question because Gothicane is more or less a culture in of itself. So what I'm saying is that it's a mix of myth and reality, depending on whom you get your information from. There's no doubt, however, that Gothicane did get its existence from mentally ill people way back in like the 1920s or quite possibly before then. When Dunning Mental Asylum, which was also known as Chicago State Hospital, decided to release some of its less, how should I say, ill patients into the city, they didn't know where to put them or where they could be productive. So the asylum during those times was seriously overcrowded, and this so-called exodus of patients from there took up residence elsewhere. It's these places that are the most familiar to modern-day Chicagoans. Lower Racker Drive was once the city's most notorious skid row. So that was a place where homeless people settled, and they were called squatters. But they weren't drug addicts or crackheads or anything like that. They were just mentally ill people that the city could not afford to take care of. Or perhaps they denied care, I don't know. When films such as Blues Brothers, and then like way later on the Batman and Spider-Man films began to shoot over there, the authorities had the squatters removed for, obvious reasons. They then began to settle up in Chinatown's Skid Row, which was coincidentally Chicago's first graffiti hall of fame. And that's where graffiti writers did murals on the support walls that now hold up that infamous bridge that crosses the Chicago River there. In fact, the 1980s band with Sebastian Bach, the one called Skid Row, filmed their music video Monkey Business there, and you could see a lot of like old school writers tags there. But there were other places, including underground areas downtown, that had gone abandoned, including the Underground Theater, which was featured in the cable TV show Cities of the Underworld, and the abandoned lower levels of Lawrence Fisheries, which left a lot of underground spaces during the 1950s and 1960s. So in tow with that, you got to look at another place called the Walls of Sin, which are basically just huge expansions of these abandoned factories, also serving as a refuge for old squatters. But it was kind of reinvigorated by a lot of taggers who did big graffiti pieces there, and that place was near the far south side. But most people don't know that it had upper and lower levels, and the lower levels were no doubt belonging to the old Gothicane culture too. But Pilsen had its main Gothicane presence in Little Village and 18th Street. So if you notice Cermak Road heading towards 18th Street, there are these drop spaces that separate houses from the sidewalks. It's in these spaces that house these portways into Gothicane. Sometime in the past, local charities began to take notice of the homeless people there, knowing full well that they were mentally sick people that were abandoned, and they just, like the authorities really wanted to make amends by taking care of their children and offering aid and financing. This in turn is what really made Gothicane, because all of a sudden there wasn't a culture of homeless drunks with mental problems living underground anymore. There was a whole assortment of their children, their bloodline, who were talented and gifted and had their own mix of religious, ethical, and moral ideals, which probably came from the different charities that tutored and cared for them. I mean, it was an unexpected social experiment, and it created this evolution of culture right underneath our feet, quite literally. You know, our time, me as a BTB and Gothicane, was a time when it was called Sub-Cermac, and we took care of houses from scrap raiders that wanted to reduce abandoned buildings to rubble before they could get up to city code. So BTB in particular had a huge apartment complex called the Body Rock Club, to which we invited a lot of our black and Asian friends to break dance and, you know, practice graffiti murals there. In turn, we protected it from scrap raiders for the owner. So as teenagers, this taught us to be tolerant of other people's races, genders, and beliefs. And I feel that Gothicane made us more adept at understanding life's subtle ethical lessons. You know, I hear people talk about Gothicane's underground spook factor and the dimly lit halls with the all year round Christmas lights and the 1920 style rooms and such, and they get scared. But there's nothing scary about the place. It was a really miraculous place, a kind of Alice in Wonderland region, but in real life, where people did their best to cope with, you know, problems of the day. So as to whether good or bad came out of it, it's not for me to say. Surely, most of its residents were indeed the children of mentally ill people. But that doesn't mean they are doomed or are crazy or are prone to hurt themselves or other people. It seems that madness had become a bit of a gift, where we, them, us, use the buzz of it to be creative and contribute through art, literature, and science. And it's through these three ideals that the myth of Gothicane lives, and its culture. And more so, really, it's up to anyone who dares go down that rabbit hole to get their own personal experience.